Welcome to the Inland Valley Storytellers Story Swap Zoom session. I'm John St. Clair, and we all know each other, so I don't think we need to introduce. So who would like to tell the first story? Do you have one tonight, Walt?
I do.
Well, do you want to start?
I'll give it a try.
Okay.
This story is called Stone Fox, and it is not exactly a folktale, but it's one of those stories that just started somewhere. No one knows where, whether it's true or whether it isn't true. It takes place in 1906 in Wyoming, in a small town. It's about a little boy named Willie. He was known as Little Willie because he was, even though he was 10 years old, he was small for his age, but he was pretty tough and wiry. He lived on a small farm, raised potatoes, a little few vegetables, and a few chickens. And his mother had died when he was a baby, and his father had gone to Alaska looking for gold and had never been heard from since. So he lived with his grandpa and his dog named Searchlight. Searchlight was a big dog, part husky and part something else. And he was called Searchlight because he had a white dot, pure white dot in the center of his forehead that looked to little Willie like a searchlight. He enjoyed Grandpa. Grandpa was full of fun and tricks, had a good sense of humor. Sometimes he would play tricks on little Willie. One time he was out in the garden pretending to be the scarecrow, seeing if little Willie would notice. One time he told little Willie he better get up early. If he slept in, he would be eating with the chickens. And one day little Willie didn't get up early enough, and sure enough, there was his plate in the chicken pen being picked clean. But little Willie was a pretty well-disciplined kid, and he didn't mind hard work. Well, one day, he noticed that Grandpa was sleeping in. So he went into the bedroom and he saw Grandpa still in bed, which had never happened before. When he got closer, he saw that Grandpa was crying. And he shook Grandpa and said, "Grandpa, what's the matter?" But Grandpa didn't answer. He just motioned with his hands that he wanted to write something. So little Willie knew that something was terribly wrong. He got a little pad and paper and a pencil, and Grandpa said that he couldn't move, he couldn't get up, and he couldn't speak. So little Willie was not sure what to do except run to go to the doctor. So he and Searchlight ran like crazy down to get Doc Smith. They came back in the buggy, and Doc Smith examined Grandpa and said, "I'm sorry, but he's had a stroke, and he's not going to be able to take care of himself. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell the women in town, there's a lot of people in church that would be willing to come out and help you. They will take care of Grandpa during the day so you can get your chores done and you can go to school, and we'll take care of you." Well, that went on for a while, and then they needed to harvest the potatoes. Little Willie was determined to do it by himself, but he found that he couldn't. There's no problem. The neighbors out there look after each other. They all showed up at once with all their wagons and equipment, and they helped him get the harvest in. But little Willie worked the hardest because he didn't want anyone to think that he was being lazy and other people were doing his work. When he went into town with the harvest, he collected his money and he bought some supplies. He came back home and he was going to put them in the little metal box that was underneath the bed of Grandpa in Grandpa's bedroom. That's where they kept their valuables. He opened it up with a little key and he found there was nothing but a handful of loose change in there and a stack of envelopes. That surprised little Willie. He thought that they had some money in there. He put the extra money that he had from their crops in the box, and then he took the letters out and went into the kitchen where there was better light, and he started to read them. Only he couldn't understand what they meant. Although he did see some words that he recognized. One of them was loan, one of them was bank, and one of them was overdue. He knew something was wrong, but he didn't know what. The next day he went into town and he talked to the banker. And the banker explained that without Willie's knowledge, Grandpa had made several loans on the farm, had borrowed a lot of money to keep things going, and hadn't paid them back for a very long time, and that there was as much time as he could give, and he was going to have to take the farm. And little Willie was just ready to cry. The banker said, okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you an extension. And he gave him a date. Little Willie came home and he put that date on the calendar. He circled it. But he didn't know how he was going to raise the money. He had to pay $800, which was a lot of money in 1906. He had no idea how he was going to get that much money to pay back. Well, winter came pretty soon. And when winter comes in Wyoming, it stays. A huge blanket of white snow descended on the entire region. It was frozen in a blanket of white ice and snow. But little Willie still could go to school because he had a little dog sled. This dog sled was special, was very small, and it was so lightweight that he could pick it up with one hand. Grandpa said that it was made by some Indians in Canada. He had bought it years ago, and it was just his size. And Searchlight loved to pull little Willie on that sled. So every day he would go to school, and every day he would come home. And the road to school was a pretty tough road. It was up over some hills with very steep and very tight turns. But that dog knew every twist and turn of that road. He could even do it at night when it was almost no light at all. Well, one day, little Willie was in town getting a few supplies, and he saw a sign posted on the general store. And it said, dog sled race, winning prize $1,000, entry fee $20. And little Willie thought, maybe if I win that race, I can pay off the loan and I can get the farm back. So he came back to pay his entry fee, and he had his $20 the day before the race was to begin. And as he was coming to pay his fee, he saw all kinds of other entrants from around. This was a race for the entire Northwest. People came from as far away as Canada, Idaho, Montana, even North Dakota to enter this race. And they were a pretty rugged bunch. These were mountain men dressed from head to toe in furs with dog sleds and dogs, teams that looked like they might be half wolf. These were men that lived alone in the woods and made their living by hunting and trapping. And then he saw a very large Indian coming down the main street on his dog sled. He had 10 dog sled, which had to be that big to carry such a man. He was powerfully built and over 6 feet tall, and he knew who this was. He was famous in the area. This was an Indian named Stone Fox. Stone Fox was a man full of hate. His land had been taken from him. His family and tribe had been put on a reservation. And he won these dog sled races all around the region. And he took the money and he used it to buy property for his people. It was said that he had never lost a race. When little Willie saw who he was up against, Stone Fox and these other mountain men, he began to wonder if it was even possible for him to win this race. But then he did think he had a few advantages. First of all, little Willie knew the route better than anyone, because the route was a big circle. It went right through the middle of town, down Main Street, and went across these open fields, and then around over the hills, up the very same steep, curvy road that he took every day to and from school. So he was small and light, and he knew the route, and Searchlight knew the route better than anyone. So he thought he might have a chance to win this race. Well, the day before the race, he came and was going to stay with the pastor and his wife so that he would be all rested up and be there early in the morning. But he was very nervous. He had to take a little walk downtown, up and down the street, to kind of walk off some of his nervousness. And as he went past the old livery stable, which had been empty, he heard some dogs whimpering. So he was very curious. He cracked open the door and he saw these beautiful dogs. He stepped in and petted one on the head. They seemed rather friendly. But as he was petting this dog on the head, a huge fist slapped him across the face and knocked him to the ground. When little Willie looked up, he saw it was Stone Fox towering over him. He said, "You do not touch my dogs." Little Willie got up and said, I didn't mean any harm. I just wanted to pet them. I know, Mr. Stone Fox, you want to win the race, and I know why, but I have to win the race. You see, if I lose, I'll lose the farm. And then I'll be basically an orphan, and I'll lose Grandpa and Searchlight. I have to win the race. But Stone Fox just stared at him with a face that was as brown and hard and smooth as a gun stock. And he said, "You go now." And so little Willie left. The next day, all the contestants lined up right on Main Street with everyone crowded alongside to cheer them on. The mayor shot off a pistol and they were off. And little Willie and Searchlight just shot off like a cannon ahead of everyone else, but it didn't last for very long. The other dogs had an advantage on the straightaways. So they started to pull ahead, and little Willie was slowly moving to the back, trying his best to keep up. But when they got to the hills, that's where little Willie knew he had his advantage, and he could cut the corners and turn very quickly where the long dog sleds with their large teams had a hard time turning those tight corners and going up the hill. So little Willie pulled ahead. He was pulling out pretty far ahead with only Stone Fox within sight behind him. And they came down to the final stretch down Main Street. And he could see Stone Fox gaining on him on the straightaway. So he called out to Searchlight, "Go, Searchlight, go." And Searchlight did. And you could see the dog's breath in the air, like steam from a locomotive. She was pulling as hard as she possibly could. And then just 10 feet before the finish line, she stumbled and fell. Willie's sled slid up and bumped against her and tipped him over and tumbled him out. He quickly got up and hugged her. She didn't move. He knew she was dead. Her great heart had burst with the effort. Snowflakes softly fell on her dark fur. He whispered to her, "You did good, girl. You did real good." But Stone Fox surprisingly did not go across the finish line. He saw what had happened. He pulled his dog sled across the road, blocking it, stepped off of his sled, and pulled out his rifle. When the other contestants came close, he said, "Nobody pass. You pass, I shoot." And nobody passed. At that point, little Willie picked up Searchlight in his arms and carried her across the finish line, and the crowd cheered. And then something happened that hadn't happened in a very long time. If anyone had dared to look in the face of Stone Fox, they would have seen a tear coming down his cheek.
Wow. Great story. Great
That is a
story.
magnificent retelling of this wonderful book and tale. And you managed to put it all together, leave nothing essential out in what, 10 minutes time, 15 minutes time?
That's what I was shooting for.
It was great. It was wonderful.
thank
I
you.
loved hearing it. Loved hearing it.
Thank you.
How long did it take you to learn that?
Oh, well, I used to read that to my students as a book in the wintertime. And I kind of rewrote it a bit because there were some parts I didn't like or I thought were unnecessary. And I added some things I thought made it a little more dramatic or interesting. So I worked on it this week while I took my walks. Well, for the last week.
Good for you.
Thank you very much.
Good work.
That is a story worth telling to an audience that has paid to hear it.
Yes, definitely.
Very
My problem when I used to read that story to my students, my biggest problem was that at the end I would choke up,
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I almost did tonight.
yeah, yeah. I have a couple stories like that I have to be careful with. Okay, well, who would like to be next?
Well, I don't have anything new to tell. So I'm looking at my ancient story list and thinking, what haven't I told in a goodly while? But before I tell a story, I want to say that on the 20th at 3:30 California time, I will be performing in a concert with the Doc Moore Storytelling Group. Okay. And I can send the link to you, John, and you can send it out. But they
Okay,
are doing their first open concert by Zoom. That is, they'll have a set of storytellers who will tell from 3:30 our time, which is 5:30 their time, until however many people have signs up and finished. So they will not be all concise, quick tales, but they'll all be professional quality storytelling. And there's no charge for it. But I'm sure they'd welcome donations because, like all guilds, they have expenses. In any case, I'll send that out to you by email, so that if anybody wants to join in, they can.
where is this guild located?
Okay. The Doc Moore Storytelling Guild tells out of his hometown, which is Dripping Springs, Texas.
Hmm,
And I'm sure you've never heard of him. Anyway,
No.
The Texas Storytelling Guild has concerts named after him every year. And they have, of course, their big festival in San Antonio. And they've managed to stay fairly active as a group, but basically it's all by Zoom and it's all local people. So this is a big step out for this particular guild Tim Tingle is the storyteller who is spearheading this effort. And I heard him at one of our festivals I go to as a guest storyteller a few years ago, Sierra Storytelling Festival a few
Yeah,
years back.
I've heard Tim Tingle several times in several different festivals.
But he considers Doc Moore the greatest storyteller who was ever born. So,
Wow.
and of course, Doc has been dead for several years now.
Mhm.
In any case,
Okay.
I think I shall tell what was once my signature story, and I haven't told to a group in a long time. My version of a very famous fairy tale, sort of fractured and remade, to tell a different perspective on the tale, and I think you'll probably figure it out. Hi there, happy to see you. My name is Wickland Olson Wolf, Wiki-O to my friends. You haven't heard of me? Maybe you've heard of my cousin, Biggerton Baddington Wolf, had some problems with, well, that doesn't matter, that doesn't matter. I'm here to tell you what happened to me one day. I was out hunting in the woods and having an awful morning. I couldn't catch anything at all. So I lay down by the path to rest for a few minutes before deciding where to hunt next. When out of the forest came one of you human creatures going, la 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 la. She looked at me as I lay by the path and she said, "You're the wicked old wolf." Wiki-O, Wickland, Wicked? I thought she knew my name. And so I said, "Yes, little girl, I'm Wicked Wolf. What can I do for you?" "I don't like you." Now, did I deserve that? I turned and started to head out into the forest to leave her behind when my long wolf's nose smelled something good. I turned back to her and said, "Little girl, what have you got in that basket?" "Well, I've got a basket of goodies for Grandma, but I'm lost. I don't know the way to Grandma's house." "Do you know the way to Grandma's house?" Now, did she offer me a starving woodland animal so much as a single morsel? No. So I pointed to the hill just ahead and said, "You go to this side of that hill, and then you turn to the left, and then you turn to the left, and then you turn to the left. And when you get to the other side of the hill, you turn to the right and go straight on to Grandma's house." And she went skipping off in the woods going, la, 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 la. And I started to go back to hunting. Then I thought, well, just because that little girl is mean and selfish doesn't mean grandmother is. Grandmothers are kind and generous. Perhaps she'll share with me. And so I went the straight way to Grandma's house and knocked on her door. But when she came to the door, that she said, "Good morning, Mr. Wolf. What can I do for you?" No, she just looked at me and said, "A wolf." I said, Madam, calm down, calm down." She just yelled louder, "A wolf." I followed her into the house. I didn't know what to do. She kept screaming louder and louder. And I thought someone would come and think I was doing something wrong. I don't know. So I saw a closet and I pushed Grandma into the closet. And she popped back out of the closet and said, "A wolf." I pushed her back in again. She popped back out saying, "A wolf." And I pushed her again. Back and forth we went. I pushed her back and forth. She kept shouting, "A wolf, a wolf, wolf," louder, louder, louder. I was getting very tired. That's what had happened. She popped out and my mouth was hanging open and I swallowed her whole. I didn't mean it, but I wasn't interested in any basket of goodies anymore. And so I started to head toward the door when out of the forest came that horrid little girl saying, "La, la, 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 Grandma, I got your basket of goodies, Grandma, Grandma." I looked around. Grandma's hat was on the floor. I picked it up, put it over my head, and jumped into the bed. That little girl came and opened the door and looked inside and said, "Grandma? Grandma? What big eyes you have." Well, what can I say? Like all wolves, I have big, round, brown eyes. And grandmother only had those little watery blue things. And so I just said, all the better to see you with, my dear. She stepped into the room and looked at me again and said, Grandma, what big ears you have. Well, like all wolves, I have long, expressive, ears, and you humans only have those little round, useless things. So I just said, all the better to hear with, my dear. Now, what was said next has been badly misquoted by the media for years, where she looked at me and said, Grandma, what big teeth you have. And I said, all the better to eat with, not what that horrid child said about me. But suddenly she knew who I was and she screamed out, it's the wicked old wolf, it's the wicked old wolf. I jumped out of the bed and started to head for the door, but there was a table between us and she went this way, so I went that way. And then she went that way, so I went this way. And back and forth we were going. And all the time she was screaming louder and louder, it's the wicked old wolf, it's the wicked old wolf, it's the wicked old wolf. I didn't know what to do. Suddenly the door burst open and there was a man with an axe. I leaped over the table, leaped over the girl, ran toward the door and oh! The pain in my side was terrible. Now, if it hadn't been for society for prevention of cruelty to woodland animals taking me to the hospital, I wouldn't be here to tell you this story today. But the next time you hear of that horrid little girl, Little Red, you'll know what really happened.
All right.
That was fun. I loved it. Thank you. I hadn't heard you tell it before.
Really?
Yeah,
No,
I think,
it was, have you?
Probably been several years. I used to tell it constantly and I got tired of it.
yeah, I remember hearing you tell it. It's a great story.
Quite a twist.
Yep.
Your turn, John.
Well, what about Adrian? Adrian, do you have something? No, she isn't showing. You and Barbara?
No, I don't.
Okay, well, I do actually have a story.
Good.
And it's a folk tale originally. Oh, let me put myself on spotlight.
Hi, Adrian.
And I don't have a story. Hi, I don't have a story tonight. As you can see from behind me, I have boxes. I just finished my move this weekend. So I am happy to hear John tell his tale.
Okay, all right. So this is a folk tale originally from Turkey, but I'm going to tell the Croatian version. And it's called The Most Precious Gift. Long ago, there lived a very rich and powerful sultan, and he had a very beautiful daughter. She was so beautiful, it gave new meaning to the word exquisite. And this sultan was very proud of his daughter. And when she came of age to marry someone, he decided that someone who wanted to marry such a beautiful daughter should be willing to give him a very precious gift. And so he sent out a notice saying, anyone that could present him with the most precious gift in the world could have the hand of his daughter. Well, he got quite a response. There were kings and princes and adventurers and scholars, all kinds of people brought gifts for the king, but none of them really qualified as the most precious gift in the world. Many of them brought lots of gold, but the sultan was rich. He had rooms full of gold, and some of them brought precious silver, but he also had rooms full of silver, and some brought precious jewels, but he had mountains of jewels, and some even brought beautiful horses with golden saddles and silver bridles. But the sultan had 500 horses, and each one had a golden saddle and a silver bridle. So that wasn't the most precious gift in the world. It's something the sultan already had. So eventually people stopped trying to present the most precious gift in the world, and the sultan's daughter remained unmarried. Well, also at this time, up in the mountains, there was a very small kingdom, and the king there had 3 grown sons. And one day he called his sons to his room and said, I had a dream last night, and I dreamt one of you would marry the Sultan's daughter. Oh, really? Which one of us? I don't know. I woke up before I found out which one it was. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give each of you 1,000 gold pieces and send you off in search of the most precious gift to see if you can win the hand of the Sultan's daughter. Now, the three princes were not only brothers, they also were best friends. And they decided they would work together to try to find the most precious gift. And they had heard about this village way up in the mountains, a magical village full of magical items. And they decided to see if it was true. And so they set off on their horses. And after a long journey, they arrived at the village. They tied up their horses in the town square. And they noticed there were 3 main streets going off from the town square. So the oldest brother said to his younger brother, he said, why don't you take the street to the left? I'll take the middle street. And then he said to his youngest brother, and you take the street to the right and go through all the shops and see if you can find a precious gift. And let's meet back here in 1 hour. So the 3 of them each went their separate ways. And the oldest brother, the street in the middle turned out to sell nothing but mirrors. And he went into shop after shop looking at mirrors, and some of them were quite beautiful, but none would qualify as the most precious gift in the world. And finally, he came to the last shop. And he heard a voice, and the voice said, what do you want? I hope you're not here to waste my time. And the brother looked, and he saw this little man with long black hair, a black beard, dressed all in black with a black pointy hat on his head. And he said, well, I don't think you can help me, sir. I'm trying to find the most precious gift in the world. Oh, said the man, it's in the back. What? And the man said, I said, it's in the back. Don't presume things by what they look like. Follow me. And so the brother followed the old man into the back, and he was rummaging around on a table, and he found this mirror with a copper area surrounding it, copper frame. And he said, this is the most precious gift in the world. And the brother took it, and he said, well, it's old mirror. It doesn't look very precious. And the old man said, well, think of your father. Look into the mirror and think of your father. And so the brother looked into the mirror. He thought of his father, and the mirror became cloudy. And then when the clouds disappeared, there was his father sitting in his room reading a book. And he said, this is fantastic. It is, isn't it? Said the old man. Anytime you want to see somebody in the mirror, you just have to think of them and they will appear. I'll take it, said the brother. How much does it cost? 1,000 gold coins, said the man. And so the brother conveniently paid all 1,000 gold coins he had been given by his father to the little man, and he headed back to the village square to meet his brothers. Now, the second brother had gone to the street on the right, and he happened to be in a street that was full of carpets, shops selling carpets. And there were some beautiful carpets, but none of them qualified as the most precious gift in the world. Finally, he came to the last shop, and he walked in, and there was a little old man with long black hair, black beard, dressed all in black with a black pointy hat that said, what do you want? I hope you're not here to waste my time. And the brother said, well, I don't think you can help me, sir. I'm looking for the most precious precious gift in the world. And the old man said, ah, you too, huh? It's in the back. Where? Said the brother. Weren't you listening? I said it was in the back. Follow me. And so the brother followed the little man into the back, and it was just full of rolled up carpets. And he went rummaging around, finally pulled out this one carpet, and he unrolled it, placed it on the floor. And he said, this is the most precious gift in the world. And the brother looked at it and he said, well, it's an old used carpet, and look, it has a stain on it. The man said, sit on the carpet and think about your father. And so the man sat on the carpet. He thought about his father, and in an instant, he was in the room with his father. And his father said, what are you doing here? I sent you off to find the most precious gift. Well, I was looking for the most precious gift, but this little man, and as soon as he said little man, he was back in the little man's shop. Wow, said the prince, this is a precious gift. How much does it cost? And the man said, 1,000 gold coins. Anytime you want to go somewhere, just sit on the carpet and think about where you want to go, and you'll be there in an instant. And so the prince paid him the 1,000 gold coins and headed back towards the town square. Now the third brother, the youngest, went up the street on the left, and this one was full of food, fruits and vegetables and all kinds of good things to eat, but nothing that would qualify as the most precious gift in the world. And finally he came to the last shop, and there was the little man all dressed in black, and the prince saw the man and spoke to him first and said, good day, sir. How are you doing today? And the old man was a little bit taken back by the friendliness of the prince and said, well, I'm doing fine. What can I do for you? And he said, well, I'm trying to find the most precious gift in the world. Can you help me do that? And the man said, of course you are. Yes, I can. Just follow me into the back room. Wonderful, said the young prince. And he followed the little man, who was kind of taken aback by the friendliness of this prince. And when he got into the back, he rummaged around and he pulled out this very large lemon. And he handed it to the young prince. And he said, this is a magic lemon. It's the most precious gift in the world. And the young prince said, oh, I'll take it. How much does it cost? 1,000 gold pieces, but don't you want to know what it does? What magical thing it does? Oh, of course, said the young prince. How stupid of me. Yes, what does it do? And the little man said, well, the juice from this lemon will cure any illness or disease, but it can only be used once. So save it for when it really is most needed. And the young prince said, that is a precious gift. Thank you very much. And he gave the little man the 1,000 gold coins and headed back to the town square. And they all arrived about the same time. And the oldest brother spoke first, and he said, well, I hope you all can think of good wedding gifts for me, because I have the most precious gift in the world. It's a magic mirror. And then the next brother said, well, I don't know about that. It might be me, because I have a magic carpet that will take you wherever you want to go. And the two of them looked at their youngest brother, and he said, well, I have a lemon. And the two brothers laughed. You have a what? And he said, well, it's a magic lemon, and the juice from this lemon will cure any disease or illness, but it can only be used once. Well, how do you know it works? Did you try it? Of course not, said the prince. It can only be used once, and besides, I'm not sick. Well, the two older brothers smiled. They loved their youngest brother. And after all, he was the youngest and he was cute, but they didn't think that his gift was likely to be the most precious. And so the oldest brother said, well, let me show you how this magic mirror works. Let's check in on the Sultan's daughter. And so he thought about the Sultan's daughter, and the clouds appeared in the mirror, and there was the Sultan's daughter in bed in her chambers with her father standing next to her crying. And there were other people standing around, and she did not look well at all. And the oldest brother said, she looks like she's very ill, maybe even dying. And so the second brother said, well, let's unroll this carpet and all sit down on it and go to try to help her and bring the lemon. And so they all got on the carpet, and he thought about that princess's bedchambers, and in an instant they were there. The Sultan pulled out his sword and said, what are you doing in my daughter's chambers? And the oldest brother said, calm down, Your Majesty, we are here to help. I saw in my magic mirror that your daughter looked very ill. And so we all jumped on my brother's magic carpet that brought us here instantly. And my youngest brother has a magic lemon, which hopefully will cure her of her illness. And so they gave the lemon to the doctors that were there, and they sliced it in half and squeezed the juice of it into a cup and had the Sultan's daughter drink it. And as she drank it, the color began to come back to her pale face. And when she had finished drinking it, she smiled and said, I feel better. And the fever had broken. Well, the Sultan was just delighted that his daughter was better. But he had a problem now. All three of these young men had brought precious gifts. The magic mirror had allowed them to see that she was ill. The magic carpet had brought them there in an instant before she had a time to die. And the magic lemon had cured her of her illness, but it was gone now, couldn't be used again. He didn't know what to do. Well, his daughter solved the problem. She said, Father, the magic mirror and the magic carpet are very precious gifts indeed. But the most precious gift of all is life. And the youngest brother, with his life-saving lemon juice, really presented the most precious gift. The Sultan agreed with her reasoning, and the youngest brother and the Sultan's daughter, the princess, were married soon after, and they lived happily ever after. And the other two brothers took their magic carpet and their magic mirror and had a lifetime of wonderful experiences.
Cool. Yay!
Now, I want to read
Fun.
from, I don't know if you can see this. It doesn't work well with the background, does it? Anyway, I got this from Stories of Hope and Spirit, Folktales from Eastern Europe by Dan Ketting. And one of the neat things about this book is at the end of each story, he tells something about it, background or whatever. And I want to read to you what he wrote at the end of this story, because I think it's very interesting.
What's the title again?
The title of the book, well, the title of the story is The Most Precious Gift, but the title of the book is Stories of Hope and Spirit, Folktales from Eastern Europe. So this is what he wrote at the end of this story. I'll have to put on my reading glasses. After she told the story, so most of the stories in here are from his grandmother, who was Croatian. After she told this story, Nani would always ask me to name the most precious gift. Each time she asked, I offered a different answer until finally I gave up and asked her for the solution. She smiled and said, the most precious gift is the friendship between the three brothers. That was the most precious gift. Because of their friendship, they could work together and solve the problem. This story is found in the Balkans, but is of Turkish origin. It is hard to separate the Balkans from their Turkish influence. And so I add this story giving credit to both because I learned it from my grandmother, and to honor the Turks whose ghosts still haunt the tales of the Balkans.
Ah,
That's great.
And I see Nick is here now. Do you have a story, Nick?
Sure, I can tell one.
Yay.
This is one that some of you have heard before because I've told it a long time ago, but it's one I can only tell at this time of year and in this kind of a year, because not only is it January, but it's a January with the Winter Olympics coming up, and that's what reminded me of this story. When I was a kid, I was growing up in San Diego. My family had moved there from Ohio, and I really enjoyed the improvement in the weather. You see, in San Diego, most of the year, it's between 60 and 80 degrees, warm, dry, no strong winds, no storms. In the month of August, it's really hot for a couple of weeks, and in May, there's fog in the mornings, and sometimes between November and January, it rains some. So in San Diego, the idea of summer camp was basically pointless. They had a tradition, though, that when you were in the 6th grade, you would get to go to winter camp for a week. And you would actually get out of school for a week to do this. It was a very odd tradition. I don't know of any place else that does quite that. But if you were lucky, you would be going up into the mountains on a winter week when it had snowed up there, because driving distance inland from San Diego were mountains where it actually did snow from time to time. Well, the week that I went up there, it had in fact snowed up in the mountains. I didn't really enjoy the temperature, but it was nice. It was really beautiful, the snow and the ice on the trees. And we got to do those kind of crafts that you do in a San Diego camp that are kind of not very active, but they're kind of crafty things where you take pieces of wood with moss on them and turn them into shaped pieces of wood with moss on them. But the thing was that the counselors there were there at winter camp because that way they didn't have to work as much of the summer, so they could go surfing. Now, this meant that these were not the most mountain-wise counselors at the winter camp, because they were basically surfers working their way through the winter. And in addition, one of my co-campers, because these were all the 6th graders that I knew, was Becky. Now, you have to understand that Becky was the smartest girl I had ever met. Tremendous memory, but she sort of radiated cute to the point where every boy who had ever met her immediately had a crush on her and would do whatever she asked, no matter what. And because of her memory, she did remember that we'd had a discussion in class about winter sports and the Olympics, and I had sort of mentioned enough that she knew that I watched winter sports on TV, and I did, because that way I didn't have to be in the ice or snow. I could watch them from a distance and enjoy what went on without freezing my tail off. But she knew that I knew something about winter sports, and the counselors had suggested we go up the hill and use the camp's toboggans. Now, I don't know if you know, there's a difference between kid sleds and an actual toboggan, and these were kind of kid-friendly toboggans, but they were still designed to go fairly fast down a hill. And I knew enough about one to know that this was not a great idea, but we went off and learned how to use the toboggans. And the counselors clearly knew very little about what they were doing, because toboggans don't go well on water, and therefore they had never really done this except in theory. So we went up to a place where there was lots of nice downhill slope and lots of snow, and it looked perfectly safe. living in San Diego, our backyard went off into a canyon, a chaparral type canyon. And if you've been in that kind of country, as I'm sure John has with his hiking, you know that you kind of learn that kind of terrain. Well, this was that kind of terrain, but about an altitude of 5,000 feet. And as I looked around, I looked and saw where they wanted to do the toboggan run and decided that since Becky had decided that I was going to be on her toboggan team, that I wanted to keep us alive going down the hill, because it would be absolutely terrible for me to have the reputation of having gotten the cutest girl anyone knew killed. And so I wanted to make sure that didn't happen. I also wanted to survive it myself for more selfish reasons. But you have to understand that on a toboggan, if you're not familiar with operating a toboggan, you think, well, the guy in front who's steering is the one who's important. That's not true. The brakeman sitting at the back is the one who's important, because that's the one who decides when and where you're going to stop. And when you're going down a hill on snow on a thing that's basically a 4-person sled, this is a thing you really need to do correctly. And I was pretty sure I knew when and where to stop the toboggan going down the hill. So I said, okay, you, and pointed to one of the other boys, you steer from the front, I'll be brakeman. Becky and the other person we had were going to be in the middle. And Becky looked at me puzzled and, don't you want to steer? No, I'm going to be running the brakes. Okay. Now, we were not the first to go down the hill. There were a couple of other groups going down, and they had fun bouncing around down the hill and going along. And the counselors were sort of egging people on to compete to see how far down the hill we could go on these toboggans. And I didn't think that was a good idea, but sure. So when it was our turn, I told the person steering up front a couple of things, and he followed my directions, and he would steer and I would yell to the others which way to lean, and we would lean. And we were having a great time going down the hill. We'd already passed where all the other teams had stopped, and we were still going at a good clip. And I looked ahead, and something didn't look right about the snow up ahead. And I immediately yelled, brake, and hit the brakes on the toboggan. Well, that brought us to a stop. And Becky turned around and said, why did you stop us? Why did you stop us? We were going so great. And the counselors had started the next toboggan down the hill, so we had to move off to the side and watch. And I tried to explain something doesn't look right about the snow farther down from where we were. And the next toboggan had actually learned from what we did. They leaned to the left, they leaned to the right, they moved smoothly through the snow. Faster and faster they went down, only their brakeman didn't stop where I had. They kept right on going at full speed. Now, if you've ever watched those old Warner Brothers cartoons, there's a moment when something goes wrong and time just sort of freezes for a moment as the laws of physics are interrupted just long enough for you to see the disaster that's about to happen. And as we were watching, that's what we saw, because their toboggans rails left the ground. And there was this brief moment where they were poised in midair. And then there was sort of a choof sound as the toboggan and the passengers went head first into a very deep drift of powdered snow. What had caused me to think that the snow looked wrong was that the area where this drift was where the water should have created a gully coming along the mountain there. And it was in fact filled to the brim with very soft snow. So then instead of going over the gully, they went nose first down into the snow. Now, the other people on my team said, wow, did you really figure out that we shouldn't go out into that? And I said, well, sort of. It just looked wrong. And we went over to see if we could help the others out of the snow because the counselors were still up at the top of the slope, gawking down, saying, didn't see that coming. And we went over, and I probably should have just helped the people out of the snow bank. But, at a moment like that, sometimes your mouth and your sense of humor get the better of you. And so as I was helping someone out of the very deep snow, I said, well, I guess you win. And I spent the rest of the week dodging snowballs because they did not take that as in quite the spirit I'd hoped. But I had to say something. But the fact was that we had a good rest of the week up there, except for the snow getting down my neck from the sneak attacks, and went back home, and we came back with carved pieces of wood that had moss on them. But in the long run, I came back with a story too.
All right. Great story.
So
It
Adrian,
has
you like your new place?
I have
Well,
to
actually, I want to
careful where
comment
I tell
on
that
Nick's story. So.
Well, I
Yeah,
have to
what
be
was that,
careful
Nick?
I have to be careful where I tell that story because Becky and her best friend, I think, are in Thousand Oaks.
Oh,
I can almost see it unfolding like that movie, A Christmas Story. You almost could
Yeah.
see like the kids in that. Oh my gosh, that's funny.
So you see, you got at least partly unpacked.
Oh, yeah, well, not much, no. I just got everything in finally on Sunday, and I'm so exhausted. I sort of have been slightly unproductive. I had a big job app due tomorrow. Due yesterday. We can stop recording this portion of it unless we have more stories.
well, yeah. Let
Okay.
me ask, anybody else have a story? And
Not a
then
story,
before
but I do want to say to the whole group, as the whole group is listening in, that I found the link on Facebook for the Zoom concert I'll be involved with on the 20th of this month, but I can't seem to figure out how to send it anywhere, how to copy and paste it or something. So I'm not sure how I will get it to you. I will email Tim Tingle and ask how I can get it back to you guys. But I'd certainly like it if some of you could tune in at 3:30 on the 20th and listen to a Zoom concert from the Doc Moore Storytelling Group in Dripping Springs, Texas.
and Nick, do you
Oh,
have any announcements before I stop recording?
Well, the only one I wanted to make sure people knew about is that the Earth Up conference that was done last year is happening again this year. It's going to be in April, and it's on the National Storytelling Network website. I'm supposed to be helping again with the selection of the stories that are going to be presented on the virtual conference. So we'll see how that goes. I should know in, I think, a day what it is that I'm going to be evaluating. But that was an interesting challenge next year, and the submissions are due. Actually, they got postponed. It's 2 days because there was a technical problem over the weekend. So I think on the 13th is the deadline for people submitting stories and things for it. And I'm supposed to be helping evaluate which ones are going to be actually in the virtual conference.
Oh, I didn't realize Angela was here.
Yeah, she just got here.
I just got here.
Some of
Hi,
us saw her
Angela.
sneak into the back of the
Hi.
room.
I just got here, and I'm thrilled to know that Adrian found a new spot, and I want to know where you are.
Oh, but before we do that,
Once
I'm gonna
we
stop.
stop recording, I'll chat. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
let me do that.